That's years old. All right, folks. We're going to get started. Thank you all for coming. We do appreciate the opportunity here. And my name is Michael Simons, and I'll be facilitating the question and answer period. We're going to have about a half-hour presentation, and we're going to have a half-hour question and answer, and then we're going to have some pizza. And before we get started, though, I do want to thank the West River Community Project for providing space for this community meeting. They are a nonprofit center dedicated to promoting local agriculture, economics, and social activity. They hold lectures and educational events teaching the community about different aspects of farming and food production. Just recently, they held lectures on permaculture, beekeeping 101, vermiculture, and had a seed exchange. They have a state-of-the-art kitchen in the basement of the building back there, which is available for community members who want to produce local food or start a small business, and maybe if they've outgrown their kitchen. There's also a thrift shop upstairs on the second floor, and if you haven't been to the Friday night pizza night, you're missing a great opportunity to see a lot of old friends and meet some new ones. Make your own, design your own pizza and have it baked in the cob oven up there. And when you're waiting for your pizza, the Townsend Farmers Market is all around here, so you'll be able to find local produce to buy. And if any of you are interested, Kathy Scott there, you can talk to her about opportunities to volunteer here or whatever you would like. It's a wonderful organization, especially if you're new in the neighborhood. And back to tonight's presentation, Meadowsend, Timberland, and Iberdrola Renewables present an update on the Stiles Brook project. They'll have a half-hour presentation, half-hour question and answer, and additional discussion during the pizza. And please hold your questions until the question and answer period. And I want to turn the discussion over now to the head producer of Meadowsend Timberland, Jeremy Turner.
Thank you, Michael. Well, thanks. Nice to see a lot of familiar faces here tonight. And we do thank you for attending and your interest and participation in this important matter. MTL has invited you all here tonight for learning the opportunity to be updated and to ask questions on the current status of wind research on our 8 square miles of land in Grafton and Windham. In addition to inviting you and several professionals from Iberdrola, much of our MTL team is here tonight. Jamie French, our managing partner for the family companies here, Jamie. Laura French, which is no relation to Jamie, is here. She's our mapping, inventory, and planning manager. Melissa Belcher is here. She is our public relations manager. And Ryan Kilborn is in the back there. He's our North Region Forest manager. So just to give you a little background for those folks that are new faces, because there are some here, I thought I'd just kind of go over who we are. Meadowsend Timberlands is a small family-owned company. The French family owners of MTL, have been in the wood business for 6 generations. We're based in New London, New Hampshire. MTL owns and manages forest land throughout northern New Hampshire, northern New England. The French family has directed the management of their lands to be sustainable, productive for the long term. The land base is open to the public, and we do encourage traditional recreational uses, including hunting. Bob French, the patriarch of the French family, created one of the first conservation easements in the country back in 1978, and now over 70% of our 30-some-odd thousand acres of land base is conserved with working forest easements. We do continue to protect more land every year with conservation easements. We're currently working on a forest legacy on 700 acres we have in Jamaica, Vermont, and Stratton, Vermont, right on the southeast side of Stratton ski area. So we're pretty excited about that. The foresters and the staff of MTL have been given the directive by the French family to manage this land base as if it were our own, which is pretty amazing. We take this responsibility quite seriously. We take great pride in our commitment to sustainable forestry, keeping lands working, provide locally sustainably produced forest products and jobs. To us, sustainable forestry is much more than just timber. It includes everything from wildlife, aesthetics, soils, water protection, recreation, education, conservation in the local community. So, kind of closing up here, we, Meadowsend, like you all, must understand all the positive and negative effects of potential wind development. What facts we and you learn from a fair process and study results will enable all of us to make an informed and educated decision about our position on wind development on Stiles Brook. MTL understands this is a long process, and naturally fact-finding takes time. We, as a well-respected and responsible steward of the land, value the thoroughness and rigors of the studies required to learn about wind development on our land. MTL goal is and will remain to learn about the potential costs and benefits of a wind project on this property. This is a serious management matter to us. So that's kind of what I wanted to just introduce you folks about for tonight, and I'm going to send it over to Laura now, who can give us a bit of history and why we're here tonight.
Thank you. So, I wanted to start out with something a little bit different, but I wanted to let you know one of my favorite quotes from Barbara Kingsolver. It's simple. The quote is, "Living takes life," and it basically means that everything we do has an impact on something else. Environmental and social responsibility means in part that you consider this, that everything we do has an impact. From the food we eat, how it's grown and transported, the refrigerator we use to store it in, fertilizers and pesticides that we use in our garden, mowing our lawns, our carbon footprint, our cars, air travel, our houses, all the stuff that's in it, to the landfills we use when we throw that stuff away. Everything we do and use impacts something else. We make choices every day, and I ask you to consider the impacts you make in your life. Because we at MTL manage our forests for renewable resources, things that we use every day, a big part of our story is evaluating what our impacts are and practicing sustainable forest management and guiding our management to minimize those impacts. We take our responsibility to the environment and the local community seriously. So what does sustainable management involve? Forest management involves integration of many of the sciences: geology, hydrology, wildlife biology, ecology, pathology, entomology. It also includes silviculture, cartography, surveying, road building. We use statistics and study economics and global trade. We must follow and understand local zoning, state and federal regulations and laws. We need to be familiar with and understand deeds and easements. And a big part of forestry involves people: sociology, psychology, community relations. Sustainable management requires a level of proficiency in all these disciplines. Our management begins with learning about the land. We learn the land by spending time and getting to know the tract. We walk every acre several times. We study deeds and historical documents. We perform a comprehensive forest inventory looking at the natural community types, soils, hydrology, wildlife habitat, special places, land use history, and the greater landscape. We study the forest type and structure, tree quality and health, plant and shrub species, water and wetland features, and recreational and educational opportunities. All of this information gets compiled into comprehensive management planning documents and maps, and we use this information to guide our management practices based on our landowner objectives. We take the time to carefully lay out forest work according to our plan. We hire respected loggers. We establish quality market relationships, follow up timber sales with proper job closure and monitoring. We at MTL take sustainable management in all its complexities seriously and are proud of our track record. We have nothing to hide, and we have been proven leaders in conservation and sustainable forest management. So that brings us to Stiles Brook Forest and how we got to where we are today. The sustainable management of Stiles Brook Forest has required vision. The reality of owning and managing this tract of land is complex. The working history of that large piece of land tells much of the story. There's a handout on the table that illustrates the 200-year working history of that piece of land, which began in the 1800s. It was managed throughout the 1800s for agriculture. Hosted at least 18 working farmsteads there. At the turn of the century, as all the farmers moved west, the forest was allowed to regrow. Land was bought in 1919 by Vermont Marble. They harvested red spruce there to use for packaging crates. In the late 40s, it was sold to Stevens and Thompson's paper company. They managed it for paper pulp. Stevens and Thompson sold a easement to Gulco to put up power lines that bisect the entire tract in 1968. And then in the 80s, the land was held by a number of TIMOs, Timberland Investment Management Organizations, which basically managed the land on a rate of solely based on a rate of return for its investors. And then, after that 200-year period, in 1996, MTL bought the land and began management based on long-term sustainability to maintain the working landscape status of the land. So the forest resource on Stiles Brook is substantial, but one that has historically been abused and degraded. Our management attempts to restore the quality and function of the forest while keeping it as working forest land. Since the 1990s, the unreliability of today's weather and markets is making long-term ownership more and more difficult. This reality has led us to explore options that would help support the sustainable management of this incredible resource. And so in 2012, we turned to the possibility of wind development here. On a basic level, wind appears to be a good fit for Stiles Brook. Wind complements working forest land. Wind is a renewable energy resource, and from the working history of Styles Brook and lack of pristine or unmanaged land, and the existing established road system and power line add to the potential as a good site for wind development. So what would the benefits of wind be? Wind is a locally produced, renewable energy source that helps us reduce our carbon footprint, and wind would provide economic support to keep Styles Brook a sustainably managed working forest, which is also open to the public. So is wind a good fit for Styles Brook? We are still in the learning phase. We're evaluating what our potential impact would be. We do not yet have enough information to make an informed and educated decision about wind here. We're in the midst of a multiple-year study to gather more information. As professionals who practice sustainable land management, we understand the importance of comprehensive planning and extensive studies. And as landowners, we want to make an informed and educated decision about what is right to do for the land and the local community. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. So we're going to switch gears now and invite Iberdrola to come up and start to go through the motions of where we are with the studies and results. So Jenny Brio, the project manager. Thank you.
Thank you. I am Jenny Brio with Iberdrola Renewables, and I wanted to thank all of you for coming, and also thank the community store for providing this great space, as well as the pizzas we'll enjoy later, and Claudia Holmes for the desserts that we'll also enjoy later. And I'd also like to thank Michael for his willingness to facilitate this evening. I'm just going to share for a few minutes about where we've been and where we are, and then I'm going to turn it over to Don Hammond and Michael Clayton, also from Iberdrola Renewables, to talk more about where we are with the results of our meteorological tower data, as well as the studies that are underway and will be underway throughout the next year in order to gather information, additional information, to determine if this is a good spot for a wind project. We're at the stage now where we think it is a good site, but we don't know that yet. We won't know that until we finish our data collection and begin to share that with MTL and with the community, and start to have a more thorough and detailed conversation about those results. 2 years ago, we installed 3 meteorological towers at the Styles Brook site, and 2 of those are in Windham, 1 of those is in Grafton. Some folks, I recognize them, we presented last year some of those results, and Don will do that again this year. So as a result, we are moving into, on this timeline you'll see here, into 2015, which is getting into the more environmental studies, the interconnection studies, more specific studies. And our goal here over the next year is to complete those studies and start to share those with you. And so I'm going to hand it over to Don and Mike to share a little bit with you about what we're going to be doing over the next year, and then I'll come back and share a little bit more information about where we go from there, and then we can answer your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. I'm Don Hammond. I'm part of our engineering team at Iberdrola, and I was here in Windham a year ago, and it's nice to be back and have an opportunity to share a little bit more about where we are in the process. As Jenny kind of pointed at a typical timeline for a project, we're still pretty early in the process. We've got a lot to learn. A wind project is complex from a lot of perspectives. It's complex for us. There's complex decisions for MTL. There's complex decisions for the community. Huge amount of information we need to collect and absorb and process to really get the sense of what does this project mean? What does it mean to us? What does it mean to MTL? What does it mean for the community? As Jenny indicated, 2 years ago we installed 3 meteorological test towers. The first place to start in looking at a wind project is what is the wind resource? How much wind is there? How much energy could potentially be captured? We started that process a year ago when we met here in Windham. We indicated that the results from the first year looked promising, but we needed more information. A project that we will build here is going to be least a 25-year life. That means we need to have some pretty good confidence that the wind resource that we base our decisions on is predictable over 25 years. So you need more than 1 year of data in order to say, okay, it's repeatable. So now we have 2 years of data. And the 2 years, the second year is pretty consistent with the first year, which is a promising sign. We still have some questions about the wind resource as far as the strength of the resource in different areas. Still need more confidence in the long-term repeatability of the wind resource. It's a complex site. It's basically a plateau. It's not a ridge line like a lot of the projects in New England. But on top of the plateau, it's not flat. I mean, there's a lot of terrain, which disrupts the wind flow, and so we have turbulence. And turbulence is something that has to be considered in selecting turbines. Different models work differently with different amounts of turbulence, and different models work different based upon how much wind energy there is and what turbine is going to best capture. So we have enough information there that we feel it's prudent to move forward in collecting additional information. There are huge amounts of information that we really need in order to make any decision as to whether the project moves forward. So we're trying to understand more about the site. We need to do a comprehensive survey, a boundary survey, so that we know exactly where the boundaries are, where the easements are. That is a key factor in defining the space that we have available to potentially install turbines. We need to understand the terrain in more detail. We know generally what the terrain looks like, but in the design of roads and considerations for the grades of roads, where they can best be constructed, the complications of construction, we need to have much more detail. So somewhere probably this fall, we will be doing a topographical survey of the parcel, and this will be done by an aerial survey, aerial cartography. We'll fly over the site, collect data on the terrain, and have that map. So we have very accurate details of the site that will help in our civil engineering of the project. As I think Jenny mentioned, if this project moves forward, we're going to be generating energy. It needs to be delivered into the regional power system. So we have initiated a formal study process to look at the feasibility of inputting power into the regional power system. The transmission lines, as Laura mentioned, are owned by Belco. We've had discussions with them from a couple of perspectives. One, looking at their corridor, how far they would want turbines separated from their power lines and their corridor. A substation would have to be built in order to connect power to the transmission lines. We're having discussions with them as far as where that might best be located. And where that is located, then we'll probably determine where our substation would be that raises the voltage of the energy up to where it would interconnect with those power lines. And then once the substation location, then in addition to a road network to connect all these turbines together, there's an electrical system that's got to be built to connect all of these turbines together. That all ties together to form a very complex design of an entire project, and all of those factors need to be considered in looking at where turbines might be located, and the location is then going to determine how many there might be. So at this point, we're still in the early stages of studying. We're collecting data. We are in the next year going to be doing a lot more in some preliminary engineering, gathering more detailed information on the site that's going to allow that engineering, and then at the same time start moving forward on the environmental aspects of the project that Mike Clayton is going to talk about.
Thanks, Don. As Don said and Jenny said, my name is Mike Clayton. I work in the Permitting and Environmental Group with Iberdrola Renewables. I'm responsible for coordinating and managing all of the wildlife studies, environmental studies, cultural resources, visual, sound, shadow, a few other things that we'll put together this board that has all this stuff on it that I'm going to talk about here. Going to give kind of an overview of some of the things that we've started and talk a little bit about some of the things we're planning on doing a little bit later this year. We just completed some field work for what's called a raptor migration survey. That raptors, it's a general term for birds of prey, hawks, vultures, falcons, owls, those kinds of birds. So we just completed our spring field work for that study. We coordinated the survey effort closely with the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources. We were up on site, I think about 10 times throughout April and May, in accordance with the work plan that we got approved by the agency. We'll be doing another raptor migration survey in the fall, which will start towards the end of August and continue into October. We've also just started what's called a breeding bird survey, which documents the birds that use the site for breeding. That is also closely coordinated with the A&R, with the wildlife biologists at the A&R. We go out, we've identified about 33 survey locations within the project area, and we go out there a few times in the beginning of June and a few times at the end of June. And again, those survey methods and timing is all really closely coordinated with the A&R. We submit a work plan to them, they review it, they ask questions, we give them the answers, and then they approve that. So we just got started with that, and like I said, we'll be back out there towards the end of the month. We've also started what's called a bat acoustic monitoring survey. And what that involves is setting up these advanced microphones on stands, and they right around sunset, they turn on and they record bats calling and making their passes throughout the project area. This is another study that was closely coordinated with the A&R. We've selected, I believe we have 7 locations where we have these detectors out there, and those will be up. They were up, we put them up in the middle of May, and they will be up through the end of September. And then when all that data is collected, the bat biologists on our team will analyze it, determine the species of all the bats that made calls, and then we'll compile all that information as part of a report that we'll submit to the A&R. And the same goes with the raptor migration surveys and the breeding bird surveys. At the end of the studies, we analyze the data and submit reports to the A&R for their review, comments, questions. We go through that whole process with them. So those are the things we've started and like I said, gotten to. We have a bunch of other studies we're looking to start here later this summer and into the fall. We'll probably carry over into next spring. We need to coordinate with the A&R with regards to any rare or threatened or endangered plants that might be found on site. We will have botanists go out based on information we get from the agencies and do surveys to see if any of those plants exist. We will be doing habitat surveys for deer and moose and bear this winter. We have to do wetlands and water body surveys and stream assessments to document any wetlands that are on the site, determine the quality of the streams. We're going to be doing archaeological surveys, architectural surveys where we go and document all of the structures and houses and barns within a certain distance from the project area that are 50 years of age or older, or any other structures that might be on the National Register of Historic Places or eligible to be on that list. We coordinate those surveys real closely with the Vermont Division of Historic Preservation. We will be doing a visual assessment once we get a layout that that we're comfortable with. That will assess the visibility of the project from all places kind of within about 10 miles from the project area. That assessment will have mapping that shows where the project might be visible, It'll have computer-generated simulations from lots of locations throughout the project or throughout the area, showing what the project might look like from those locations. We'll be doing a sound assessment to assess the sounds generated from the project. We have to assess shadows, so we have to, there's a lot of stuff that we have to do. We've just begun here this spring, and we're going to be working with all the applicable agencies to make sure we're collecting the data they need us to collect and are analyzing it the way they want us to analyze it. So, and I'll be around here. There's pizza, so if anybody has any questions, they can ask them during the question and answer, or you can come up to me and we can talk about birds or bats or anything you might have on your mind. Back to Jenny.
Thank you, Mike and Don. One thing I did want to mention is that our permit for our 3 Met Towers is good for 3 years. So we are looking to continue to collect data, so we will be filing a permit extension, an application for a permit extension for an additional 2 years here in the coming weeks as well. So we will look to keep these up for at least another 2 years at this point, at least seek the permit for that. So kind of summarizing and giving you a sense of where we are at this time as it relates to the layout is, as you can tell, we are working diligently to have a layout so that we are able to continue with the studies that Mike has talked about and to be able to share with you a preliminary layout, or what I call a study layout, because it's always a very iterative process and the results of many different things you see here can impact that layout. So our current goal is to be able to work toward having a preliminary study layout to share with the community this fall. In addition to the layout, we'd be also showing visual simulations as well as sound. And in addition to that, for the fall meeting, we'd like to also use that layout to calculate what potential economic benefits would be related to the project for the local community in Windham. So, well, I know this evening we do not have a layout and do not have some of that specific information for you. We are working toward having that and having that for you this fall. So we'll look, in the October, November timeframe before hunting season, if we could have another meeting and have that to show folks. In addition to that, if, and I say if because there's always things that change, if we're successful over the next year at completing all of these studies, having all of these results, and being able to provide the community with a project proposal, which would be the layout and all the accompanying studies, and those studies become public. We'll share those with you as we get information, you'll get information, and our goal is over the next year to accomplish that, all those studies, compile those into a project proposal that we can share with you next summer, probably late summer, and be able to share that with you, talk through that with you, and then be in a position, as precedent has been set in Vermont, all the existing and operating projects have gone to a town-wide vote on a project. And our goal would be in a position to allow you to have a proposal to vote on next fall. So that's our current goal. And we'll be having a lot more meetings going forward, so if for any reason we're not accomplishing our goal, I will let you know that along the way, but that's our current plan. So what we'd also like to do, and recognize that in a 2-hour evening when you're trying to add pizza in, it's hard to talk about all these very specific, complex issues as part of our review and analysis. So we'd like to start also this fall having smaller topic-specific meetings. So a meeting that's maybe visual and sound, and one that's avian and bat, and all those other things, so that folks can come if they have specific concerns and get into really the issues on that topic instead of trying to cover all of the topics in one evening. So so we are, like I said, we think we're in a good place here, and we want to know. So we're going to take the next year along with MTL and hopefully you in the community to determine if this is a good place for a wind project. So that's all I have to say. We'll go to the question and answer. Besides Don and Mike from Iberdrola Renewables, we also have Paul Kopelman and Ed Cherian that will also join us from Iberdrola Renewables for the question and answer. Thank you.
Some questions, and please make it in the form of a question. Sure.
How do they plan on communicating with us?
How do you plan on communicating?
Okay. We will, well, let me ask, communicating with you on information.
On meeting dates.
On
and
meeting
times.
dates. We send out direct invitations.
How?
By
Just
mail.
asking because
I'm sorry,
I
by
didn't get
mail?
one. Yeah, no. As a second home
I
homeowner.
recognize you, and we
yeah, I
had this
didn't get it.
conversation before, so.
I don't think any of the second homeowners get it.
Okay. We do it by mail, and we're also talking about Facebook page as well, and so that will hopefully help in those situations, but we should definitely correct that issue, and we will.
Jenny, Melissa?
Melissa's here.
Yeah.
That'll check them out, yeah.
But in terms of communicating.
Oh, communicating with Melissa as well, but as far as an invite to a meeting, I think it'll be formalized in the form of mail and Facebook announcements. But it's good to know that you're not, and the second homeowners are not getting the mail, so we'll get that straight.
The Sheffield timeline you show there obviously is a project that's up and running. Where is that if I wanted to take a look at it? Is that in Vermont, Sheffield?
Yes, that's in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont. If you go up 91 up to Lyndonville, Vermont, take that exit, and then it's north of there, a town or two.
Do you know where, is it in the town of Sheffield?
It's in the town of Sheffield. Yes. And that's actually the land that's on is owned by our company Meadowsend. So
The Stiles Brook project somewhat similar to the Sheffield one?
I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
The timeline? Is
Well-
it similar?
If I were to go up there and look at it, would I be looking at something similar that I would see here?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
and if there's enough people interested, I'd be happy to get a bus and bring people up too. So
Except you said it's a ridge line, every other project in Vermont, and we're a plateau.
Well, I think what I would say is that the turbines you'll see there are similar to what you would see at Stiles Brook. So not necessarily the land, but the actual technology of the turbine
Yeah.
would be similar. But I personally have not been to Sheffield, so I can't speak to the similarities in the land. But yes, on the turbine technology.
Same number of turbines, basically?
We don't have a number of turbines here yet. This fall we'll be sharing those. The question was the same number of turbines. And I think here we've been saying somewhere between 20 and 30 is our range, and that's what we're working with. So drawing a blank on how many are at Sheffield?
16.
16 at Sheffield.
So, I know we don't know what we're doing yet, but I live on Wheeler Road, which is a great access point for the pole lines. So if you end up, and you don't know how many you want to put in yet, but if you do put them in, because I did go to the railroad yard up in Island Pond, I was amazed by the length of these things. Are you going to come in off Route 11 up the pole lines, or are you going to be coming out at Wheeler Road? I'm just very curious if any idea which way you're going to approach.
We really don't at this point.
You don't have any idea.
Usually on a project, as we get farther down into the process, we will do a formal route survey. There are multiple factors involved. One, we don't know who the turbine manufacturer will be. We don't know where they will be made. We don't know where they will be shipping from. We don't know whether they're coming partway by rail and the rest of the way by truck, whether they're going to be trucked completely. So that is all survey work that is yet to be done.
What, the Sheffield, how long has that one been in?
When did that go operation?
that went operational in
2011?
yeah.
Yep, 2011.
And the studies that you did there, you're doing the same ones that you're doing here?
Yes.
So that information that you gathered for Sheffield, does that, has it changed any with the wildlife and stuff like that? Like you did the study saying it doesn't affect them, doesn't affect this, doesn't do that? Are you finding now that it is?
One of the things to clarify is we did not develop Sheffield. the
That's
Sheffield
a-
project.
That's the other question I should have asked.
Yes, sorry, Sheffield is not ours, it is MTL's land. And so we use the timeline as an example to kind of show the typical, process and the time it takes. What I would say,
I was just going to say the process is really determined by the state of Vermont. And so the general requirements of the studies, the definition of the studies, the work to be done, what goes into the final proposal and an application, assuming we get to the point of everybody agreeing, that is a defined process. So that process is going to be very similar to what was done by the developers of the Sheffield project.
But I think as far as the question about impacts on wildlife, we have other projects here in New England in the Northeast, and we haven't had any projects where there's been any surprises based on what we've saw pre-construction surveys and then having any impacts post or anything different. For the most part, and you know, you kind of see the same wildlife. There hasn't been any issues.
I have a question about the turbines themselves and how they're maintained. They're big machines, and obviously people are pretty concerned about the noise that they might make. I'm sure every different model of wind turbine would have a different sound to it, just like every car sounds to it, and depending upon how it's maintained. What happens when one of those things up in Sheffield starts squealing, when a bearing goes bad? What's the procedure? Is there people on site there to maintain them? Is there a number that people call? Have you had something like this come up where you had a noisy turbine needed to be greased up or something?
I can't speak to Sheffield, but we do have an operations team at each project. They are aware of the machines. The operation of the machine is it's largely automated, but there's a huge amount of communication, and that communication is available to the plant staff on site, as well as all of that information is transferred to our National Control Center. So our National Control Center in Portland, Oregon is monitoring every turbine, every project across the United States on a 24-hour-a-day basis. So they know how the turbine is performing. If there's a specific issue, you know, with a bearing going bad or something like that, the people on site are going to be aware of it, not necessarily immediately, but certainly we have communication processes such that residents can let us know that there's something occurring that we can follow up and check on.
I guess my co-question with that is, so for a 20 to 30 turbine installation, are you going to would there be people on site 24/7, command center monitored, 9 to 5 during the week? What's the normal procedure for something?
The local staff is not there 24 hours a day. They're typically there during the day.
We're always on call. So
They're
somebody
always
always
on
someone
call.
will be on call.
Right. They're always on call, and we are monitoring 24 hours a day in our National Control Center.
And if I might just add that permanent employees, probably depending on the size of the project, between 5 and 7 permanent employees. And yes, like Don's saying, it is always monitored, and you always have 2 technicians on call. So, and they're notified. If I may just make one clarification before the next question.
Sure.
When I was talking earlier about the timeline and being in a position to provide you with a proposal to vote on, what I should have added and meant to add and didn't realize I did not was that we, Iberdrola Renewables, will honor that vote. If your vote is no, then we will take down the Met Towers and not develop the project. If it's yes, and I think it's determined that this is a good spot by MTL first and foremost, and the community is that if the answer is yes, then we would look to see whether or not we move on to the next phase. But I just wanted to clarify that we would honor your vote.
And Jenny, just to clarify, moving on to the next phase would be submitting an application to
The Public Service
Board. So no application will be submitted for the project until all of these processes, all of the evaluation, the proposal is prepared, and a town vote occurs, assuming that the town plans to have a vote.
What happens if one town votes one way and one town votes the other way?
More meetings.
I think our goal and our confidence here is that we're going to do our job the best that we do it, and we're going to give the community with our plan is a project in both communities. That's the proposal we're working toward, and at this time we will honor Windham's vote, and I can say that our hope is that we'll give you a good project and you won't be able to say no to it.
There's been a lot of talk about Sheffield, and I've got Jeremy and people here. How many megawatts is for the Sheffield project predicted at 27?
Megawatts?
Yeah.
No, I think it's 48,
Okay.
40.
And you applied for 99 megawatts with the grid. You were talking about 99 megawatts with the New England grid. So how are they the same size projects? I'm a little concerned.
I don't think we're saying they're going to be the same size projects.
Well, that's what I just heard you say. That it's saying.
I said 20 to 30 turbines here.
Yeah, well, just go ahead and tell me how.
Okay.
47 equals 99. I'm
Well, it's a
confused.
different size of turbines, so well, I guess I'll describe where Jim is, the 99 megawatts. So Iberdrola Renewables filed an interconnection request with the independent system operator in New England, and they review all of any power, facility that wants to interconnect has to go through a process with the ISO New England, it's the independent system operator in New England. So we filed that, and that is a multi-phase process that falls in this timeline. It takes about 3 years. The first phase is what they call a feasibility phase, and that takes about 6 to 8 months usually. And what we have to do is kind of pick a top level, because you can never increase it, you can only decrease it. And we also have to understand that technology is always changing, and turbine output, the megawatt size, can change. And the turbines that we're looking at here can range between 2 megawatts and 3.3 megawatts. So we chose 99 megawatts as a bar, or as the greatest number. I think that's because, like I said, you can only reduce, you can't go higher. So we always, just to build in for uncertainty and technology, you always go larger in the size that you study, and then you scale back from there. So that's where the 99 comes from. We are asking that the ISO New England study 30, if you were to interconnect 30 Vestas 117 3.3 megawatt machines. That's because that's the biggest out there right now, and we want to work from the biggest backwards, I guess is the best way I would say it. We want to understand what is the most, not what is the least that you can put on, and if there's any issues with that number. That helps, I hope.
Thank you.
At some point, does the Public Service Board have to issue some sort of a statement of public good?
Yes, the certificate of public good is
When does that happen?
That would not happen until after the community has voted, and then we would file the application, and then that process can take about a year and a half to go through. So that's an entirely additional review of the project by the Public Service Board, by the community, by many folks that are involved in that process. So that is a very thorough and rigorous process, but they are the permitting agency in Vermont in order to get a permit to build a project. So it's called a Certificate of Public Good, and it's issued by the Public Service Board of Vermont.
So by the time we vote, will we know the placement of wind towers and that sort of thing? Because right now we're being mailed scary pictures by...
Yes. This fall, we'll show you a preliminary layout, which I would say may or may not be the layout that you will vote on next fall. Because, like I was saying, all these studies or the results of interconnection, all these things can change that. But what I would say is this fall, you will have an exact example of what we're studying, and then that next summer will be the final project proposal, which would be what we would be issuing, potentially planning to put into
So
the
we can
public
get
service
some
board.
accurate
Yes.
mental pictures of this.
Yes, we're going to also have visual simulations to show you, based on this preliminary layout that we'll show you this fall. So based on those
We
locations.
need that.
Yes, we're working toward it. We had hoped to have it by now, but it's just, we're not there yet. It takes time.
And if I could just add briefly, I mean, we're looking at this fall to have as Jenny said, a preliminary layout, really a study layout that defines what areas we need to be conducting all of those studies in. It may change as we move forward, but when it changes, we certainly will be coming back and showing what's changed and what the impacts of those changes are, both from a sound standpoint and a visual standpoint, so that when a proposal gets brought to the town at some point, in 2016, it's not going to be a big surprise, because you will have seen the process as we have moved through the process, and you will be hearing from MTL that they followed what we've done too, and that they're still in agreement. This is a good project for them.
So I'd read, I don't know if it was Lowell or Sheffield, but the wind towers, the technology to accept the power into the power line was not working, and we were just wasting power. Has that all been worked out yet? In other words, these wind towers were spinning, and the grid could not accept the power. And I know that was a problem they were having.
I can't speak to this problem. It wasn't right, but what I can say is that's part of the interconnection study. There's curtailment, or if there is going to be any congestion that would cause the project to be curtailed,
Yeah.
that would come out in that study. And so I should just mention, as part of the interconnection study that takes 3 years, these phases, there's the feasibility study, then there's a system impact study, and then there's a facility-specific study. So these all get into exactly what you're trying to answer. And because they're not our projects and I don't know the details, I can't speak to the results of their interconnection studies and how that played into that decision. But I can tell you that if there's going to be issues, or if there's concern about congestion on a line, it will come out in this study. And they'll, of course, they'll communicate that to us, and we'll have to adjust accordingly, which, okay.
I got one more question.
Go ahead.
Sorry. So, and then let's say you build whatever, 5 or 20, and I know we have all these tours to go to these various places, and what I'm hearing is you can't get close to these unless you have permission. So, when these are built, are we going to be denied access, and will there be fences up? And in other words, will the local person who's out cruising around encounter fences?
So you and Margaret will be able to walk the same path. Up in Sheffield, that was a scare tactic too, and the only restriction up there is the main entrance gate, which protects the main truck road.
Okay.
There's still ATV trails all through the property. People camp,
They do,
hunt, and
yeah.
exercise and walk their dogs all through the facility. So.
Excellent.
And I would say that, it's the landowners. We have no restrictions. It would be the landowner that makes that decision. So we have no problem with it staying open.
So there will be no major difference in being near those towers during icy conditions, or there'll be no part of that entire track that we won't have access to that we had access to in the past.
I would say that there would be access restrictions on, like I said, the main gated road system that the maintenance road is. Obviously the substation's going to be fenced because of generation. But other than that, as long as people aren't, as long as they're behaving, not shooting rifles into turbines or doing stupid stuff like that, it's a privilege, like any piece of land. So.
The only thing I might add to that is that because we would be operating the site, and obviously you can imagine safety is very important, and if for some reason there was a question of safety, there may be some type of temporary period of time where some portion could be unavailable. But it would be temporary, it would be, because for some specific reason, it caused a safety concern. No plan to have any gates or anything around.
I just wanted to make the comment to remind everybody, I've said it before, but our family's intention is to put this land under conservation easement as part of this process if it does proceed. So if you're looking at the long-term protection of the land that was not going to be used for the turbines and the roads themselves, which in Sheffield was how many acres? About
68 acres.
68 acres of about a 2,000 acre piece
2,700.
2,700 piece of acre of property. The remaining part of all that land our intent is to have a permanent conservation easement with forest management on the rest of the property. So for the long term, that's pretty substantial benefit open space for this part of Vermont, being one of the largest tracts of private land that's left in the southern part of Vermont.
I guess I'll address this to Jenny. Is there a particular point on your timeline when the communities affected would have opportunity to mitigate certain situations that would be more favorable to the community, like this lady's, she has a desire to continue to be able to walk. And can things like that be mitigated at some point, and at what point would that be?
Do you
I mean,
mean,
we've heard word of mouth, but in order to lock things in that may affect the citizens of the two towns, at what point would we have a chance to mitigate?
you mean, I guess maybe if I understand I don't fully understand the question with mitigating, but basically getting a commitment from us and MTL?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
At what point would that occur?
I mean, they're the landowner, so I
Yes.
guess I would have to have them give the grant of access, not Iberdrola, but, I think,
It wouldn't be any different, Bob, than I think the rest of our lands.
Okay.
We're, you know, we're fully supportive of traditional uses, and I don't see why that would ever change. And we can do something formal at some point, but with a working easement, I mean, that's a guaranteed right with the public typically. So,
Thank you.
yeah, sure.
Yes, sir.
My wife and I own the land that Iberdrola built a wind farm on in Lemston, New Hampshire. Our land is left open for people to use. We have 5K races on it, benefits the local Chamber of Commerce, and we keep ours open also.
So, Bob's question about working with Meadowsend on access, et cetera, I think there's a second part of that question, and that is, when would the towns be able to talk to Iberdrola about things like if you were going to put towers on the ridge line right above town, which is the major ridge line in the area? When do we get to talk to you about the fact that we don't think a 500-foot tower a half mile from town is acceptable? When do we discuss that?
I mean, I think you are right now. I mean, I don't know if there's a formal, during this process over the next year as we work together, I mean, I think we'll be taking a lot of folks' opinions and comments and processing those and, evaluating those. And then I guess, the vote on the project would be your vote.
Well, my concern is that the Lowell towers are 2.5 miles from town. And Meadowsend has a lot of land that's a half mile from town. And there's a huge difference between towers 2.5 miles away and towers, especially 3.3 megawatt towers, which would probably be over 500 feet tall, a half or maybe less than a half mile from the town on the ridge right above us. And that's, I think, the viewscape and things like this. This is a big, big concern for folks who own property in that area.
And we recognize that, and it's, as we said, we intend to be back this fall, and at that point we'll have this preliminary layout. We'll plan to do visual simulations so that you can understand what it is going to look like from various locations of the turbines modeled in that area. We'll have information on sound. We'll have, that's the point we can really start to have a discussion, because you have something that you can really look at and assess, rather than just a general indication that a turbine shouldn't be closer than half a mile, or shouldn't be closer than a mile, or shouldn't be closer than 2 miles. That's the point, I think, that we can have that discussion meaningfully.
Thank you.
Well,
We got one right here.
Yeah, I've got a question. A project like this is pretty capitally intensive, if I'm not mistaken. How much of this project has to be subsidized for it to really work financially, the economics?
I'm Paul Kopelman again. I'm also with Iberdrola Renewables, and I'd say that, as a blanket statement, every type of power generation gets some type of subsidy, and you all probably know that, and it's different forms. What we're looking at here, in terms of the timeline, is, if all continues to go well, talking about construction years from now, we don't know what federal policy, what state policy will look like at that point in time. We don't know what technology is going to mean at that point in time, but what we do know is that the technology keeps getting better, it keeps getting more affordable. So it's not something that we know at this point in time what federal policies would be in place then. But I think what we've always asked for and sought is an equal and fair playing ground when competing with other types of generation sources.
So for the project to go forward years from now, 2 or 3 years from now, it will have to be subsidized?
I'm not saying that. I don't know what the technology will look like years from now and what that's going to mean in terms of our ability to finance the project and build the project. So what we're saying is we're looking to be treated the way that other types of energy sources are treated at that time in order to create as a fair market as possible.
So up to now, you haven't been able to build the project unless it's been subsidized?
Nobody has in any technology source.
So what's the percentage of the ones in the past, the ones you've already done?
The current federal policy that's been sort of start and stop for some amount of time is called the Federal Production Tax Credit, and it basically creates an incentive for good production of wind farms, and it's a little over 2 cents a kilowatt hour currently.
Okay, I don't know what that means.
On your electric bill, you are using, you are probably looking at kilowatt hours as your consumption. An average home uses about 1,000 kilowatt hours per month across the United States. So at bare minimum, the more we are producing energy, the incentive is to create for the wind companies to find the best wind sites across the country.
Okay, I don't think my question was answered.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, and I'm happy to talk about it more if I'm answering it badly too. I'm happy to.
No, I don't understand.
Okay. Well, let's talk about it more after. I'm happy to do it.
Maybe some pizza would help.
No, I'm just curious how much upfront money has to come to put these towers in place.
Sure.
Well, can I
Go ahead.
We self-finance all our construction. There's no government subsidy or money that goes to building a wind project. So, but it's a capital-intensive project, like you pointed out. You have to get that money back over time. And so there's different ways you get revenue. One is selling power, right? You're selling electricity. There's also renewable energy credits that are generated in different parts of the country. And the third is a tax credit, all right, which is based on how much power is actually delivered onto the power grid. All right, then there's a tax credit that's given by the federal government, or was, it's expired. So those are the different ways in which you have revenue streams to pay it back. But the construction of the project, the purchasing of wind turbines, something that we self-finance, and there is not a dime of taxpayer money involved.
However, you do expect to be subsidized over the period of time, over the 20-year period that you're talking.
The tax credits are